r/ask Reddit. What's something you've experienced that most people haven't? A cop called me back after giving me a $380 ticket. He told me he had acted rashly and in anger and told me to rip up my ticket, and he was doing the same. Wow, that's a really humble guy. Thanks for sharing. He really was a great cop. Even though he said he was mad, I didn't feel that he was angry with me. He just seemed stern. Then quite nice at the end. Plot twist. He didn't rip his ticket. As shitty as it is, that was my first thought. I've had my house raided where cop cars immediately block the driveway. There's cops everywhere, even in the backyard. They all had masks. They got a tip that we were selling drugs. We weren't selling drugs. They proceeded to put us all in handcuffs and sat us outside trying to interrogate us while they turned the house upside down. They said something amongst each other and just uncuffed us and walked off. It was the wrong house. We know because the house around the corner was raided about a week later and they were drug dealers. When you're sailing across oceans, the bioluminescence can get pretty powerful due to the lack of light pollution. It causes the breaking waves to sparkle, and when the dolphins arrive you have a combination of a sky full of stars and glowing dolphins surrounding the ship and leaping out of the water whilst still having a glow to them. It's almost impossible to photograph due to the lack of light. The dolphins can be seen for a long way underwater too, so it looks like you are surrounded by glowing torpedoes. On an aircraft carrier, during darkened ship, while standing on the fantail, the bioluminescence looks like a green highway all the way to the horizon. Pretty powerful stuff. I've swam and body surfed in a phosphorescent sea. Moving your hand underwater makes it glow like a phantom hand. Goes dark as soon as you stop. Breaking waves get really bright. I'm a lesbian, and I once had my long-term girlfriend call and tell me she'd gotten pregnant unexpectedly. That was not a call I'd ever imagined getting. My friend's daughter came out to him as a lesbian in her late teens. A few years later, after she had moved out, she called him and said, "Daddy, I'm pregnant." He paused a bit and said, "Worst lesbian ever. He's a very loving parent and would love her either way, but never passes the chance for a dad joke." Did she try to claim it was yours? Lesbian Mary, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I've told this story here before, but one time my girlfriend and I were having sex after showering together. I had water stuck in my ear, but right as I came my ear popped as well. It was the strangest and most amazing combination of feelings I have ever experienced. I've tried to recreate it since then, but have yet to be able to sync it up again. I remember you telling this story ages ago. I never stopped thinking about it. I fell off a Ferris wheel. Please go into detail. I was in Puerto Rico and 8 years old. There was a footrest, a seat, and the bar that clicked in at about shoulder height across the front. I hadn't ever recalled being so high, and I saw really far. I stood up to get a better look, and almost immediately after that, the ride stopped. The seat lurched, and I fell out. It was about 5 meters. Woke up a few days later in a cast with a catheter. My dad wanted my mom to sue, but she said it was my own fault for not following the instructions. I had a problem with doing what I was told as well as balance when I was younger. Too long didn't read. My dumbass stood up and fell out. My mother and I won a $2 million wrongful death suit against the construction company my father was working for when he fell through an unfinished rooftop. I believe the lawsuit was the largest personal settlement ever awarded in my county at the time. My mother was also pregnant with me when my father died. Within 5 years of winning the settlement, my mother's alcoholism and bad investments left us with only about a quarter of that, which was in a trust I inherited when I turned 18. I had a slew of bad experiences dealing with a large windfall of cash at a young age with almost no guidance. It tore my family apart. All of my relatives see me as a loan officer who owes them whatever they want because they're family. My mother lives in Section 8 housing and hasn't worked since 1999. I have a good therapist. I am so sorry, fellow goats wearing clothes enthusiast. I hope your life gets better from here on. I once went to this overnight theme park caravan campsite when I was younger, around 7, to stay with my family for the weekend. My sister and I were on a roller coaster that was enclosed in some sort of giant room and absolutely pitch black. After our cart had rolled away from the workers and entered the black room, I realized the harness you pulled down over your head was not buckled, and I had nothing holding me in. I started to panic because it was impossible to see what was coming up next, and for all I knew I was about to go upside down and plunge to my death. There was a hilarious older Scottish woman in front of me who kept yelling obscenities once she found out what was going on, and was trying to hold my harness down as best as she could by reaching her arm back, along with my sister. Even though I thought I might die, her commentary was enough to keep me laughing still. Luckily there were only some high drops, but no upside down loops. I've never been afraid to go on roller coasters or any other rides after that, and still love the adrenaline rush, but I always triple check that my harness is on properly. I'm 7 feet, which is near the limit of a lot of rides. The problem that happens is they don't know or post this info. I've been on a few rides that the latch bars or other safety mechanisms fail after the ride starts. It took me a few years to realize this, but they didn't always check a ride for someone too big, and I was the one testing it. I do not ride big rides anymore. Our 23-year-old son's body was found in the woods a week and a half after he committed suicide. That was last week. I hope no one ever has to experience this, much less most people. Sorry for the Debbie Downer. Just needed to type it out because it doesn't seem real still. As a 23-year-old who only just failed to follow through the same thing your son did not 6 months ago, I'm really sorry that happened. Depression is a terrible thing. It really is a fatal illness. I once got a standing ovation. The band I was in was performing in my hometown one night. Many people in the audience knew me and they started a drum solo chant between songs. It spread to the rest of the crowd, so I did an impromptu solo. I have to say, hearing that ovation made me giddy happy. Still one of my happiest, proudest moments to this day. You just reminded me of the one autograph I gave after a show. It also felt pretty sweet. My band played a few high schools. One time we did an afternoon gig and I had preteen girls asking for my autograph. I was about 18 at the time. I remember as I was signing them thinking, oh yeah, this'll sure be worth something someday. Had a bunch of policemen profusely apologize to me after wrongly arresting me. Go on. It's not that good of a story. I dropped my mum off at the door to our apartment and went to park our car at the car park we rent monthly, which is about 2 blocks away. After I park I realize I couldn't get out of the door, which required the scanning tab thingy since my mum had it. I climbed the wall since it was only about 2 meters tall, and as soon as I hopped over, a police patrol happened to drive by. They stopped and asked me what the hell I was doing. I told them what had happened and they continued to ask for my address, which I couldn't remember cause I had been living in another country for the last 6 years. I'm not really sure what happened or why they got so aggressive, but I ended up getting semi-violently arrested and was brought to the police station, where I used their phone to call my uncle, who is a bit higher up in the local police hierarchy. They let me go when he showed up, also giving me a can of warm Coke. I became a physician as a second career. My last name is House. I met Hugh Laurie, made him laugh. House and House. I had a doctor in the unnamed house. Once, I felt a little bit bad for laughing when he introduced himself. I thought it was a joke because I came in for weird symptoms, a chronic illness, and always said I wished Dr. House was around. My crazy, then, boyfriend was threatening me with a knife. If you've ever been physically abused, you know that the worst part isn't first contact. It's the anxiety of waiting for the first hit. So I snapped and said, so ducking, stab me already. And he did. 0/10 would not get stabbed again. What you gonna do? Stab me? I've had sex with me. No one else has done that. I'm not bad. I'm not bad. LMAO. I drove a homemade motorized beer cooler on the Trans-Canada Highway while sober. Had my arm up 1,000 cattle rectums. Source. Graduating as a veterinarian in several months. Went on a mission trip in Guatemala and went around with the veterinarian. The first time I ever saw someone stick their raw hand up a horse's ass. It was so hard not to die laughing and be somewhat mature. I defended a death penalty case. I've had numerous cases where my clients faced life without parole. Public defender? No. All of my clients hired me, for sure. Public defenders get into the deep end fast. I have shot a person. I have been awakened by D and local sheriffs with shotguns pointed at me. I came home one day to find my mother-in-law dead in her bed. I have taken a hot air balloon ride. I saw Pigpen live. That's one hell of a day. Sounds like he was all out of bubblegum. I'm a student nurse for context. I was in the ICU for clinical rounds and watched an unconscious 96-year woman on the telemetry unit while her daughter was in the room with her. She went into severe sinus bradycardia, slow heart rate, and was on her way out. Her other daughter was rushing to get there after the sister told her the situation on the phone. After the phone call, her heart rate shot up and improved substantially. It was obvious she was holding on for her daughter, and it was amazing to see that such a thing was actually possible. After the daughters said their goodbyes, she passed holding both of their hands. It was simultaneously sad and awesome. After the daughters were gone, I experienced another aspect of nursing I hadn't thought about. Preparing the body for the morgue. You have to remove all lines, IV, PICC, catheters, and dressings, clean and tag the body, and place him/her in a body bag. Then, a special cart that has a compartment for the body to go in, to avoid strolling down the hall with him/her visible, is ordered. Pretty heavy and interesting stuff. I work as a CNA, and the first time I prepared a body for the morgue was surreal. Here I was, washing this person's body knowing that they had passed on less than an hour previously. I never thought I'd say this, but in the medical profession, you do get used to it. I don't know if you've been with a patient who was an organ donor who died with preservable organs, but the harvesting is more grueling than dead patients to me. That might be because family members pack into the room and insist that there is something more that can be done. And when it finally hits them that their loved one is truly dead and just being kept alive for donation, they break down. When there's a dozen people in the room, it can combo up real quick. Source: worked in inpatient pharmacy, had to prepare the medication to keep donors alive, and was friends with many of the ICU nurses. I rode in a helicopter across half the continent, a twin Huey. Huey wasn't a twin, he was a triplet, with Dewey and Louie. I sat on top of a car with my legs dangling down the windshield at 65 miles per hour, with a beer. I'm well aware this was beyond a stupid decision, but I was young and drunk. Coming up with an original recipe that people actually liked, it's a great feeling. Was it spicy enough though? Quite blunt there, aren't you? I took a red eye from NYC to LA once and chased the setting sun across the country. I've seen both Pacific and Atlantic Oceans in the same day. Maybe not all that rare, but special to me. Oh, and once I asked my brother to throw me a Hershey Kiss at a barbecue, and he unwrapped it and threw it at me. I caught it upright on my tongue from like 30 feet away. I'm oddly proud of that one. Animal handler, LOL. Few days IQ from venomous snake bite and another overnighter for another snake bite. Contemplated giving CPR to a dying seal. Barn owl talons attached to my pectoral muscle, and various other bird of prey talons stuck to my hands, arms, and once my face. Good times, LOL. What do you mean contemplated? A squirrel jumped up my leg and tried to climb me like a tree. I was having lunch at the park one day. Ducking squirrel hops on my lap, looks me right in the eyes and stole half my ham and cheese. Little bastards. Temporary quadriplegia, Guillain-Barré syndrome. T's kind of a crazy progress to be quadriplegic and begin to recover. Seeing some progress was always incredibly encouraging for me because, while most people with my condition recover significantly, it's not always complete, and my case was so extreme I was worried I'd be on the less recovery side. When things seemed to stall for a week or more, I'd get concerned, but I was stubbornly optimistic. Then, I'd usually get another little jolt of progress. November 1st, last year, I was paralyzed below the neck due to Guillain-Barré syndrome, which had begun progressing just days before. 2 days later, my lung stopped working and I was put on a ventilator. The number of tubes connected to me was pretty crazy, and since I was intubated, I had to spell things out by pointing to letters on a sheet with a straw held in my mouth. I later was given a set of glasses with an attached laser which helped speed the process up a lot. It took a few more weeks for me to hit rock bottom. Then I finally started showing some progress. I probably had a little more neck mobility, but the most obvious first improvement was being able to wiggle my fingers. GBS usually starts in the toes, works its way up, then reverses. So, being able to move my toes again came much later. I'm very lucky that I'm back to talking, walking, biking, and even running again 5k race on Thursday, but my feet aren't quite at 100% and they might not get there. I woke up during open heart surgery. Edit. To elaborate, I was only awake briefly, but it is still one of my most vivid memories to date. After being prepped for surgery, I fell asleep after getting the anesthesia, expecting that when I awoke I'd be in recovery. However, I blinked awake to see the doctor, nurses, technicians etc. working over me. I couldn't move, but I could feel them cutting me open. I was numb so it didn't hurt, but it was a very bizarre feeling. The closest thing I can compare it to is if you take your knuckles and press them firmly into your chest one at a time in succession. I didn't see them actually cutting through, as my eyes were looking up to get their attention. They weren't looking at my face so they didn't notice. It didn't matter because I fell back asleep very quickly. I was a kid at the time when I had the surgery, so afterward telling someone about waking up during wasn't at the forefront of my priorities. I woke up in the recovery room with no idea where I was, intubated, with only strangers around and my parents nowhere in sight. Feeling scared was more my focus at that time. Too long didn't read. Woke up during surgery. Didn't hurt. Mostly uneventful but was still more fun than Awake starring Hayden Christensen. War. When I was 3 years old, war started in Yugoslavia and we had to flee to Germany because we lived right at the Croatian-Bosnian border. Although I was only 3, I have very vivid memories of the events, like hiding in a bomb shelter, hearing rapid gunshots, and the journey to Germany itself with my mom, brother and some stranger by train. Thank God that's all I ever saw. I was riding my bike home from the gym and right when I turned the corner on my street a moth flew into my ear. I'm talking about inside my ear, not around the edges, but deep inside. It was the most disturbing feeling I've ever had in my entire life. I ran inside freaked out, but didn't feel anything for a moment, so I thought it fell out. Then the little buzzing and clawing began. I felt it digging into my head. Thinking about it gives me the shivers. So, I started screaming. And this was when I lived with my parents. They came running asking what was wrong. So I yelled and cursed about the moth in my ear. It started to actually hurt really bad at this point. So I threw myself to the ground and started banging my head on the carpet trying to dislodge it. My dad had to hold me down and pour rubbing alcohol into my ear, which caused it to start coming out for air. He grabbed it with a tweezer and finally got it out. This has to be the worst thing I've ever felt. And even talking about it is making me cringe all over. I can't even begin to describe the sensation. Hope it never happens to anyone. I've been bitten by a sea turtle. After performing a cover at a Humane Society charity event, I was approached by a professional band, as in these guys tour and pay all their bills with this job, and I was having a heart attack. Like, are these guys about to talk to me? We spoke for a while. Really awesome guys. Shallow Wake was the band, I believe. Then the singer asked me where my table was with my merch and CDs, because he wanted my CD. They wanted copies. I thought I was going to shit myself. Too bad I've never recorded anything. It would have been an honor to give them one. Literally got a job offer from Area 51. Not joking. Don't bother asking him to elaborate. He's already been silenced. Interviewing famous people. The first couple times it's weird to talk with someone you see on TV online all the time. After a few times, you realize they're just regular people. I once had a full-on street brawl with 3 guys. All smashed each other's faces in and then just stopped as I started laughing. A nervous response. We were all big rugby type guys who could give as well as take a punch. We then started laughing and joking about how absurd it was. Police came. I gave them the description of my friend's car. The friends who had left me on my own to get beaten up. The guys who I had just had a fight with then offer me a lift home and then drive 30 minutes out of their way to make sure I got home alright. It was one of those bizarre could only happen to me situations. I was dumped via mail this year. Pen, paper and stamp, not email. I played peekaboo with an ostrich. It's the first nice thing that came to mind. Ostriches are awesome. I was using a vending machine once and accidentally dropped my quarter. It hit the ground. spun on its edge for a few moments, and then stopped, still upright on its edge. It was crazy. My life is boring. I was at a shooting about 5 years ago. Not many people got hurt thankfully, because his assault rifle jammed after the first couple of shots. I was completely physically fine, just ducked up mentally about it for a while, but completely fine after a couple of months. I vomited diarrhea, Crohn's colitis. The experience was distasteful. I drowned, or nearly drowned. I was young, maybe 5, at a lake with babysitter. I misjudged how far I had drifted from the shore on my floaty and jumped off. I remember going underwater, and then nothing until I woke up coughing up water. Apparently my babysitter's boyfriend jumped in, pulled me out and resuscitated me. Attending to a dead body. I work nights at a convent. The floor I work on is assisted living style for the elderly nuns. One woman passed away on my shift, and I was informed by my supervisor to call the funeral home, and in the meantime wash and dress her body in a slip. The home would dress her fully. She died in her recliner, which is where she preferred to sleep, so I had to move her a lot to get her nightgown off, bathe her and get a new slip on. It was surreal. It's very strange to experience a person you've known as lively, talkative, cheerful, independent, as lifeless, having to shift dead weight that a few hours prior was a living being. C-section cow birth. That's no way to talk about your mom. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.